I'm sorry. So God is doing everything. So God willing, we're going to be reading from 34, 22, 23, all the way to the end of the surah. Okay. Auzubillahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. 34, 23. No intercession. Intercession with him will be in vain unless it coincides with his will. When their minds are finally settled down and they ask, "What did your Lord say?" they will say the truth. He's the Most High, the Most Great. Say, who provides for you from the heavens and the earth? Say, God. And either we or you are guided or have gone far astray. Say, you are not responsible for our crimes, nor are we responsible for what you do. Say, our Lord would gather us together before him, then he will judge between us equitably. He's the judge, the omniscient. Say, show me the idols you have set up as partners with him. Say, no, he's the one God, the Almighty, the Most Wise. Okay, so one of the things that we see here is that, the verse talks about intercession, and intercession might be a you know, a very difficult thing for some people to understand, but really it's very simple, as the footnote puts it, I mean, a subtitle puts it, really simply, there's no intercession, there's no such thing. It's useless. And what that means is that, you know, it will only work if somebody's already going to heaven. Somebody's already destined for heaven and going to heaven. You tell God, God, please put this person to heaven. And God is putting this person to heaven not because you told God or someone close to God told God. The person's going to heaven because they deserve to go to heaven. So in reality, whether you told God or somebody asked God to put this person in heaven, it really wouldn't change a thing because the person already deserves to go to heaven. So there's no intercession. Uh, so that's why it says it will only work if it coincides with God's will, And if it coincides with God's will, I mean, you don't really have to say anything. I mean, God already knows who deserves heaven and who deserves hell better than us. And yeah, uh, so basically, I mean, we are reminded of some very basic facts about Earth and God's system and who God is, because who provides for us from the heavens and the earth? Does Muhammad provide or Jesus provide or the saints provide? No, it's just God. Um, but yet people intercede, and it's a very common thing. Um, it's a very common occurrence. People do it all the time, and I mean, it is really absurd. But at the same time, we can see that we're not responsible for anybody, uh, and they're not responsible for anything that we do. So this is what 25, 26, and 27 we're being reminded of is we're not responsible for what they do. They're not responsible for what we do. They'll continue to do what they want, and the believers will continue to do what God tells them to do, and eventually God will gather everyone and everyone will pay for whatever they're doing. If somebody's committing idol worship, for example, that's it's not, it doesn't hurt us and it doesn't hurt God. It only hurts themselves. And on the day of judgment, they will pay for it. Of course you can advise these people what they're doing is wrong and you can remind them. But at the end of the day, they're responsible for their own crimes. It's not our responsibility to tell each and every person what to do. I mean, yeah, we could advise them, but that's all we can do really. It's up to them eventually what they decide to do with the chance that they've been given. Um, uh, and so people set up all these idols besides God, and God is continues to remind us in each and every uh, you know surah that there's no other God besides God. But yet idolatry is such a common thing. It's so um, like it's people don't think it's a big deal. I mean, people idolize not just idols and saints in life, but people can have so many other idols in their lives as well and not know them. I mean, people set up idols very easily. For example, when they listen to religious leaders and scholars that contradict what God says in the Quran, the moment you do that, you set up an idol, and you're no longer following God. I mean, it's that easy. Some people idolize their egos, some people idolize their spouses, their children, their work. So many things could be idolized. But we have to remember that God should be our God, and God should be on our mind most of the time. And you know, He's the one who created everything. And if somebody really deserves your thought and your attention, it's not what's going around you and the politics or whatnot. We should all be thinking about God. God should occupy our minds most of the day for any believer. So, God willing, I'll continue to read God's messenger of the covenant, verse 28. We have sent you, O Rashad, to all the people, a bearer of good news, as well as a warner, but most people do not know. So I'll read the footnote, 3428, as detailed in Appendix 2. The name of this messenger is mathematically coded into the Quran as Rashad Khalifa. By adding the numerical value of the name Rashad, 505, plus the numerical value of Khalifa, 725, plus the number of the surah, 34, plus the number of the verse, 28, we obtain a total that conforms with the Quran's 19-based mathematical miracle, which was unveiled through Rashad Khalifa. So 505 plus 725 plus 34 plus 28 equals 1292, or 19 times 68. More information is given in 519 and its footnote. And God willing, I'll read 519. 519, God's messenger of the covenant. O people of the scripture, our messenger has come to you to explain things to you after a period of time without messengers, lest you say we did not receive any preacher or a warner. A preacher and warner has now come to you. God is omnipotent. Masha Allah. Just want to emphasize on the fact that it says, uh, O people of the scripture, our messenger has come to you to explain things to you. It's interesting to note that here, and I'll get back to that in a moment. But read the footnote first. It says, this verse reports the fulfillment of the biblical and Quranic prophecy regarding the advent of God's messenger of the covenant. Malachi 3:1, Quran 381. The name of this messenger is mathematically coded as Rashad Khalifa. This very special verse warrants the presentation of specific evidence. By adding the grammatical value of Rashad plus the value of Khalifa 2725 plus the surah number plus the verse number, we obtain a total 1254, or 19 times 66. 19 is the Quran's common denominator, which was revealed through Rashad Khalifa. More evidence and specific details in Appendix 2. Okay, so subhanAllah, we are extremely blessed by God to be born at a time where God has sent a messenger to explain things to us, in elaborate detail, things that the whole world is confused about, the things that people have no answer to. The entire humanity is chasing different ideas and different dogmas to try to attain perfect happiness. And many people have no clue why they're here on this planet. Many people have no idea. Most people have no idea you know, which way is the right way, for example, how to observe the contact prayers, you know, all of these things, because every sect everywhere you go has a different way of doing things, and so many things. There's so much confusion out there, but God, so to take us out of all of this, to spare us all of this, God sends a messenger out of His mercy to help us and guide us, so we can find our way to God, you know. And this is something that we can appreciate. I mean, if you like to learn more about it, you can get the final testament of the Quran, and read Appendix 2, which has more details about it. But I read some of these proofs, and these proofs are there to help us reassure our hearts, uh, subhanallah. God willing, I mean, it's really a big responsibility for us as humans, being born at a time where we have received a messenger. Every time a messenger comes, it's a test for the people. A messenger wouldn't have to tell people that they're messengers, but it's an order from God, because being a messenger is also a test for people. Like when somebody comes and says they're God's messenger, it's an essential test for them, because it provokes things like the ego, when they realize, oh, God, I'm here, I'm alive, and God chose another person, you know perhaps better than me, who is a messenger, and why him and why not me? And these kinds of ideas, first, shows a lack of knowledge on this person's behalf, because it doesn't necessarily mean that if God sends somebody as a messenger, that they as a person are better than anybody else. They're just humans like us, but God chose them based on the information they have about the person. Obviously, the person's going to be righteous, but he doesn't necessarily have to be the most pious person in the universe at that time. I mean, there could be other people too, but knowing the qualities and situations, I mean, God will choose certain people over others to decide who's most qualified to become a messenger. It provokes jealousy and ego and things like that, and naturally, it becomes difficult for people to accept God's messenger, and many people fail that test. I mean, we have seen many people who claim to worship God alone and follow Quran alone, and when the time comes to accept the messenger of the covenant, I mean, it's an important test, they flunk, and without proof. So this is so that deserves congratulations to everybody who has accepted and have passed this very important test. I mean, a lot of people will say with their lips, even, they offer lip service to say that they believe Rashad Khalifa was a messenger of God, but it becomes evident in their action when they are not ready to embrace all the teachings that the messenger has brought, which really exposes all of their lies. Lip service doesn't, because lip service does not mean anything. It's really, we have to prove with our actions that we believe in, and we believe in, we have serious convictions about the truth, and we stand by it strong, and we follow it and adhere to it, throughout our lives. That includes all the explanations from the messenger. I mean, as the verse I just read, 5:19, it says a messenger has come to explain things to us, and it is amazing, because many people will say they accept the messenger, and then they're not willing to listen to any of his explanations, because they say, oh, well, he told us to follow Quran alone. Yes, he told us to follow Quran alone, but from the Quran, he extracted information that he was supposed to deliver, and he explained it to us in great detail. So if you're not willing If someone's not willing to accept that information and apply it in their lives, then they're just offering lip service. And many people are exposed that way. Many people at the time of Muhammad, for example, came and said, we bear witness that you are the messenger of God. And God says, He bears witness that you're His messenger, and God bears witness that the hypocrites are liars. Um, well, that also explains the fact that people mention Muhammad in their shahada. It also explains the fact that many people offer lip service and admit that someone's a messenger of God, but yet they're doubtful because they fail to follow what the messenger is preaching, and that proves the hypocrisy in their hearts. And this test is designed for, to prove our real convictions. I mean, if we just had to be given our ranks based on what we say, we wouldn't have to come in through this elaborate plan that God has created and come into this world and go through all the tests. I mean, God could just put us all in a podium and we could all deliver a beautiful speech about God, and then based on the eloquence of that speech, we could be given heaven or hell. But that's not really how the creator of the universe has decided that we be tested. I mean, we're put in situations where we have to make choices and we have to prove with our actions uh, what what the real convictions are in our hearts, and that's what makes the test more difficult for people. So God will now continue reading verse 29. They challenge, when will this promise come to pass if you are truthful? Say, you have a specific time and a specific day that you cannot delay by 1 hour nor advance. Those who disbelieve have said, we will not believe in this Quran nor in the previous scriptures. If you could only envision these transgressors when they stand before their Lord. They will argue with one another back and forth. The followers will tell their leaders, if it were not for you, we would have been believers. On the day of resurrection, the leaders will say to those who followed them, are we the ones who diverted you from the guidance after it came to you? No, it was you who were wicked. The followers will say to their leaders, it was you who schemed night and day, then commanded us to be unappreciative of God and to set up idols to rank with Him. They will be ridden with remorse when they see the retribution, for we will place shackles around their necks, around the necks of those who disbelieved. Are they not justly requited for what they did? Every time, every time we sent a warner to a community, the leaders of that community said, we reject the message you are sent with. They also said, we are more powerful with more money and children, and we will not be punished. Say, my Lord is the one who controls all provisions. He grants the provisions to whomever he wills, or reduces them. But most people do not know. It is not your money or your children that will bring you closer to us. Only those who believe and lead a righteous life will receive the reward for their works, multiplied manifold. In the abode of paradise, they will live in perfect peace. As for those who consistently challenge our revelations, they abide in retribution. Okay. So I mean, what it really comes down to at the end of the day, when it comes to belief and hypocrisy, is people's doubt about people's doubt about their hereafter. I mean, people will offer lip service about the hereafter as well and say they believe in the hereafter, but inside their hearts, subconsciously, deep inside their hearts, they don't truly believe that they will be resurrected, and this is what leads to hypocrisy and things that they believe. But God says that we have a specific time on a specific day that cannot be delayed by 1 hour, nor it could be advanced. So the time of the end of the world has already been decided by God. The year the world will end is 2280 AD, and God willing, you can read more about it in the appendix End of the World. And this was another one of the tests for people, about the end of the world, because many people will flunk uh, here, or they'll flunk on the age of 40. But um, subhanallah, all these proofs are there for people, who can take heed. Um, so these people will, not only are they doubtful about the hereafter, they're doubtful also about the scriptures that God has sent. They don't truly believe that God is the one who actually sent these scriptures, and they disbelieve in them. Some people disbelieve openly, who are disbelievers, and they don't believe in these scriptures, uh, but God tells us what will happen to these people. I mean, they might seem to get away with it now, but on the day of judgment, they will be literally, obviously, in hell. And I mean, all these people that they followed in this world, I mean, they will be fighting with them, and arguing with them, and blaming one another, because the leaders will be, the followers will blame the leaders who were scheming day and night to command these people to be unappreciative of God. I mean, how will they command them to be unappreciative of God? By making them idols besides God. So instead of God, and they start following them, they become their idols, and hence they're being unappreciative of God. And it's amazing that it says they scheme night and day. I mean, there are people who scheme night and day to, you know, take people away from the truth. I mean, they could be seemingly righteous people, but they have dedicated their lives to distorting God's message and God's religion, in the sneakiest of ways, and and there are people who are blindly following them. And this is what happens to these people too, that they blindly follow their leaders. On the day of judgment, they will all end up in hell. I mean, think about, you know, the the regime in Saudi Arabia, and all those scholars in Egypt, and the Pope, and all of these people, and the millions and millions of people who are following them. This is what will happen to them. This has already happened. God is telling us from the future. God is giving us this news that these people will be in hell. They'll be arguing with each other and blaming one another. I mean, this will continue on forever. So, I mean, think about if you get into a quarrel with someone, or an argument for 5 minutes, and it disturbs your mental state so much. But imagine, you know, imagine being surrounded by such a situation for eternity. You know, you will not be yourself. This is another. This might seem small when we read about it, but this is another form of torture when you really think about it. I mean, this is horrible, to be put in a position where you're arguing with people that you're living with for the rest of your lives. You know, and not not to mention all the terrible physical torture and torment that these people will have to endure for eternity. So it really gives you the chills. But this is the absurdity of idol worship, and this is why we have to be extremely careful, that what to make sure that we're not setting up any idols besides God. While somebody tells us something about the religion, or the practice of our religion, or what we're supposed to do, we have to make sure that we use our brains to understand that this is what God is saying. And we have to follow God's teaching in the Quran, and we have to accept the explanations that the messenger has explained, because he's a messenger from God. He's explaining to us from the Quran everything that he's saying. He's not a liar. He's not making things up. I mean, no messenger is going to come and say this is prohibited for you and this is not prohibited, and tell you lies. you know they're responsible for what they say. I mean, God, they're honest. That's why God chooses them as messengers. If they said anything besides what God is preaching them, God says He would take away the teachings from them and He would punish them severely. But obviously, you have to be a person who believes in God to accept all of that. Verse 39. Say, my Lord is the one who controls all provisions. He increases the provision for whomever He chooses from among His servants, or reduces them. Anything you spend in the cause of God, He will reward you for it. He is the best provider. So, following on with the verses that I just read, verse 35 also actually says, "We are more powerful with more money and more children. We will not be punished." So this is where people, take the comfort in their numbers and in the wealth that they have. I mean, when we read about this, in the book, like it seems like nobody will fall for it. But believe me, most people will fall for it, when they're in a position of power and they think they're more powerful and they have more strength in numbers, with children and whatnot. I mean, this is what ends up happening to them, that they become proud and they look down upon the believers who might be in the minority, but they might be presenting to them the truth. I mean, they look at you. Oh, I mean, do you think like all of these people are astray and you're guided? I mean, who's more powerful? Look at the majority. We're in the majority. And subhanallah, but God is reminding us that it's not your numbers. I mean, people who God has annihilated in the past, I mean, they were more powerful. I mean, look at Pharaoh. I mean, how much wealth did Pharaoh have? And look at his army of people that were just blindly obeying all of his commands. I mean, it doesn't mean anything. Yet people believe that, if they're more powerful, they have more money, they have more children, they're more blessed by God in the sense that they're more guided and righteous. And it's amazing that, people will fall for it. Even people who claim to follow this book and claim to follow the messenger and claim to follow the teachings that we have adopted ideologies where they have made themselves believe the exact same things that we're reading about here, which is amazing because they don't have access to the truth. But God is telling us that, God is the one who controls our provisions. He knows who how He distributes wealth among the people. Obviously, for a believer, the thing to remember is you're not necessarily going to get millions or billions of dollars in your bank account, but all your needs will be met. So someone who has that versus someone who has millions of dollars and yet they're constantly struggling and trying to get more doesn't necessarily mean that they're richer. I mean, in fact, they're poorer because they're in need. And so we have to remember that we don't judge a person's belief based on the amount of money in their bank accounts. And this is unfortunately a common practice, in the world. I mean, people will generally respect people who have, who are more wealthy, and they think that because they're wealthy, they're and more powerful, that they're more blessed by God. And but we have to remember that these are all things that God has put in place to test us, and obviously we are being tested, and having more money doesn't necessarily make anybody more righteous. But if you have money, you spend in the cause of God, uh, God will reward you for that. You know, but if you are given lots of money and you don't spend in the cause of God, that doesn't make you righteous. Your righteousness comes by you spending in the cause of God, and anybody can do that if they're given wealth. But I mean, obviously, the righteous person will be actually doing that, right? A person who is not righteous will be, spending more on themselves and, being stingy with their wealth. And but obviously, if you spend money in the cause of God, and you strive in the cause of God, and that way, it's better to be a rich believer than a poor believer, because if you're rich, you could spend more in the cause of God, you could strive more, you could build mosques, you could, spread the message, you could print more Qurans or distribute them digitally these days. But that, but just having money on its own doesn't make anybody more righteous, and it's a myth that needs to be dispelled, and we have to spell it out for people. Uh, uh, we need to spell it out for people every now and then. I think it's important. Verse 40. On the day when he summons them all, he will say to the angels, "Did these people worship you?" They will answer, "Be you glorified. You are our Lord and Master, not them." Instead, they were worshiping the jinns. Most of them were believers therein. On that day, you possess no power to help or harm one another. And we will say to the transgressors, "Taste the retribution of hell that you used to deny." Mathematical miracle of the Quran. When our proofs were recited to them, perfectly clear, they said, "This is simply a man who wants to divert you from the way your parents are worshipping." They also said, "These are fabricated lies." Those who disbelieved also said about the truth that came to them, "This is obviously magic." We did not give them any other books to study, nor did we send to them before you another warner. Those before them disbelieved, and even though they did not see 1/10 of the miracle we have given to this generation, when they disbelieved my messengers, how terrible was my retribution. 34:45, the footnote says, "The great miracles given to Moses and Jesus were limited in time and place. They were witnessed by a few people who happened to exist in that place at that time. But the mathematical miracle of the Quran is perpetual." See 74:30 to 35 in Appendix 1. God's Messenger of the Covenant. 46. Say, "I ask you to do one thing. Devote yourselves to God in pairs or as individuals. Then reflect. Your friend Rashad is not crazy. He's a manifest warner to you just before the advent of a terrible retribution." Footnote for 34:46. By placing the geometrical value of Rashad 505 next to the value of Khalifa 725, then the surah number 34 and the verse number 46, we get this number, which is a multiple of 19. So this is what we see, when the people see the mathematical miracle and they see the messenger. This is what goes on in their heads. They say, "This is simply a man who wants to divert you from the way your parents are worshiping," and he's fabricated all these lies. These are all his personal opinions, and they look at the miracle and he said, "Oh, this is all fabricated." Sometimes he adds them, sometimes he puts them side by side, and sometimes it's just his first name, and sometimes it's his first name and last name, and these are all just tricks. But we know that uh, these people are setting themselves up for disaster. But we can't help these people, obviously. It's a decision that they have made. But it's amazing when you look at these mathematical facts, um, that, as it says, it's a tremendous responsibility, because we have those miracles, that we've known about from Moses and Jesus. They were limited in time and space, but this mathematical miracle of the Quran is perpetual, and you can see it every day. And it not only confirms this mathematical miracle itself and the messenger of the covenant, but all the messengers in time that the Quran speaks about. It confirms, and all of their miracles, it proves them, because we know this is not man-made. So it's a huge responsibility, as it says that the children of Israel, you know uh, you know uh, or in the people in the past, they did not even they will not even see 1/10 of the miracle. I mean, God calls this the mathematical miracle of the Quran is the ultimate miracle, right? One of the great miracles. And so, if you don't believe in one of the great miracles, the ultimate miracle, I mean, imagine you have the ultimate responsibility at that point. I mean, this is not something that could be taken lightly. And people who just brush it off, saying this is just fabricated lies and this and that, obviously they're gonna be so remorseful on the day of judgment, but they're not going to get this time back. Verse 47. Say, I do not ask you for any wage. You can keep it. My wage comes only from God. He witnesses all things. Say, my Lord causes the truth to prevail. He is the knower of all secrets. Say, the truth has come while falsehood can neither initiate anything nor repeat it. Say, if I go astray because of my own shortcomings. And if I'm guided, it is because of my Lord's inspiration. He's here, near. If you could only see them when the great terror strikes them, they cannot escape then, and they will be taken away forcibly. They will then say, we now believe in it, but it will be far too late. They have rejected it in the past. They have decided instead to uphold conjecture and guesswork. Consequently, they were deprived of everything they longed for. This is the same fate as their counterparts in the previous generations. They harbored too many doubts. Footnote for 3453, people of all religions tend to forsake the word of God and uphold the words of men. The Jews and the Muslims uphold the Mishnah, Hadith, and Gemara, Sunnah, while the Christians uphold the Trinity invented by the Nicene Conference, 325 years after Jesus. Okay, Masha Allah. So these are, pretty self-explanatory, but really, if you really think about it, it is horrible what will happen to these people, because it says, if only you could see them when the great terror strikes them. I mean, imagine, like, when the feeling that you might get when you're standing on top of a really tall building and you realize that it's going to fall to the ground, or imagine when you're standing on top of a huge cliff and you realize you're just going to fall down now, and you have no help. I mean, but this is not even comparable to the hereafter, because it's going to be an eternal torment that will never end in your life being taken away. I mean, it's just going to be perpetual, you know so I mean, this is just sad for these people that will make such decisions. But what it shows is that these people but I mean, these it shows us that these people dig their own graves, so to speak. I mean, they made these choices on their own volition to incriminate themselves and put themselves in hell. They hurt their own souls. I mean, God doesn't put anybody to hell, but because these people made these wrong decisions, I mean, they're just paying the price. you know on the other hand, people who chose to be with God, people who chose to believe, who chose to accept the messenger and lead a righteous life based on that and dedicate their lives to God, I mean, they will get their rewards for that. It doesn't God doesn't need them, but who's going to benefit from it? The believers. These people who believed and made the right choices, I mean, they're going to be in paradise for eternity. They're going to uh, be redeemed by God, and they're gonna escape hell. So the only person who has to gain. It's like when you present these people the message and proofs about the messengership. They look at the message like you're trying to sell them something. That you or it's something for you. No, I mean, it's really a message. I don't have to prove anything to you. Really, this is the message. If you believe it, it's gonna benefit you, and if you don't, it's sad for you. You know, so there's no catch, in other words, you know, I mean, but obviously when these people see, they just look for, oh, well, this person just wants to gain prominence and he just wants to divert you from this idol worship that you're doing. They just want to diverge. This person just wants to divert us from this way, and we'll just follow what our parents are following, and they just hurt themselves this way. Um, so, but we see that on the day of judgment, there will be just regrets and remorse. I mean, um, imagine like a little bit of remorse. I mean, we should never be remorseful of anything that we miss. God says we should never be sad, you know. But imagine one time when you did get sad about something, and you know, let's say, you know, someone was supposed to, you know, give you a deal, and let's say you were going to get $1,000 out of it, and then you realize that, you know, you just got there like 2 minutes late, and you know the door was closed, and you lost that money. You know, I mean, that you would be remorseful about that, but I mean, I guess that's not even a comparable example. But just imagine like the feeling of being remorseful in itself is such a bad thing. But these people will have this eternal remorse. They will say they believe now, they truly believe now, they want to be guided, but it's be too late. You know, this was a test. The moment they see God, everything will be over. You know, the moment they see the angels, the test will be over. And you know, and it says consequently they were deprived of everything they longed for. You know, so everything that these people long for, I mean, what prevents these people from believing? You know, they think there's a catch, this person's a liar. You know, they're trying to, you know, change like you know, our ideal way of life or whatnot, you know. But whatever it is that these people long for, you know, happiness, um, wealth, I mean, children, whatever, you know, everything will be taken away, you know. I mean, the moment their lives are terminated, they will be in torment and misery for the rest of their lives, based on their own doubts, you know. So we have to think about these and think about, you know, what is at stake, so we can make the right choices. You know, this is not a game that, no, I think I believe and maybe I don't believe, and I think this man's a liar, or you know, he's just doing this for his popularity or whatnot. You know, I mean, we have if you decide to reject a messenger of God, I mean, you need to have solid evidence. If you decide to believe, you have to have solid evidence. I mean, we have physical, tangible evidence by God's leave that proves that everything that we're reading in this book, the you know, based on the Quran's mathematical miracle, is the truth. You know, everything that the messengers preach is the truth because he has presented his proofs of messengership in Appendix 1 and 2 and so many other places throughout the Quran. So we have no doubt about that, you know. And so we have to make the intelligent choice to be with God so we can redeem ourselves and uh, not end up being with people who just live a life of torment and eternal misery. And you know, we want to be people who enjoy eternal happiness now and forever, and be with God for eternity, and be with our families and our loved ones forever. So you know, we have to make the intelligent choice, and this is what God is reminding us over and over. So with this, God willing, I'd like to end, and if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free.
Masha Allah, Salman, you did a great job with the Quran study.
Thank you, Masha Allah.
Masha Allah. Thanks, Salman. God bless.
Masha Allah, Salãmun Alaykum.
Thank you, Masha Allah. Okay, so please mute yourself if you're not making a comment, and if you're making a comment, make sure you're not on mute.
Well, the self-messengership is it's something that God decides, blesses with to to accept.
Hmm.
When we see how many people who that's the most difficult. Uh, yeah, it's the most difficult test. No, it's so. It's extremely. It's that is something that really. Um, Although some people are very intelligent, they accept everything. And then when you say, yeah, this one is a messenger, you know, all of a sudden, all that belief it crumbles. It's gone. It is nullified
Right.
just
Yeah.
because they don't accept the fact that, uh, for example, God's messenger of the covenant, that Rashad Khalifa has been chosen by God to be a messenger. It's
That's right. Yeah.
but
Yeah. I
it
was. Go
that
ahead.
is something that God, yes, that is
Yeah.
something that God choose. That is something that God has decided.
Hmm.
So they accept everything from God. They accept the miracles. They accept everything, but they don't accept that God chose uh, that He renders this person a messenger to. You know.
Hmm.
So that shows you that people are mean.
Hmm.
That the finals they are they are such arguers.
Yeah.
So they accept everything step by step. Okay, and then at the end, that last uh, that last thing that that God wants them to accept, they don't.
Mm. Yeah. Exactly. I was talking to this one person, who was a submitter, and then eventually one day he decided that he doesn't accept Rashad as a messenger. And then I told him, give me one proof that he's not a messenger. And then his response was, he just presented some verses of like, oh, look, in this one it says, uh, add his first name, and in this one it says add his first name and last name, and in this one it says, put the numbers side by side. So this is not consistent. That's why I don't accept him as a messenger. I'm like, you're kidding me, because all of these are different
Yeah,
facets of the Quran's mathematical code. I mean, this is even that makes it even more amazing, because imagine if you only could make it a multiple in one way, this would be easy to build. But if you built it in a way that, okay, if you add the numbers, it will be a multiple. If you put them side by side, it will also be a multiple. If you put just this with the first name, that would still be a multiple. I mean, all of these things. So it makes the mathematical miracle even more extraordinary when you think about it, because there's different parameters of it. I mean, it's simple to understand, and it still follows the mathematical pattern, but it makes it even more powerful, when you have all of these different facts, put in together, So uh, I was just speechless, and eventually just unfriended the guy today. Uh, and maybe, yeah, but this person used to be a submitter and would would follow
Oh,
the message like just like me and you almost, and was the only submitter in his family, you know. And but I'd known him for a long time, and so he is so close to the message, knows everything, and then ends up, you know, falling prey to Satan in this way. But really, when you think about all these mathematical facts, this they really reassure us, you know, that we whatever we're hearing is from God, and it's not just, and we're not just offering lip service. You know, when we do that, you know, we when we have conviction like this, then you know, it reassures our hearts. You know, then we are fully convinced that we're following the messenger. I mean, these are not, and it proves to us that, you know, whatever the messenger has preached and explained to us, you know, they're not his personal opinions. I mean, he's a messenger of God. So now you can just, with your eyes closed, really follow the messenger and accept the message, you know, without a doubt.
yeah.
Subhanallah. Such
Yeah,
a blessing.
but you know, the person who was arguing with you, even those those signs that you showed them, uh,
Hmm.
but they are not even. I mean, I did not need these signs to accept him as a messenger. You know,
Hmm.
I accepted his messengership after, uh, before I saw these small signs that he made.
Hmm.
You know, and
Hmm.
his name with the
Hmm.
verse number. And, I mean,
Hmm.
there's simply only the fact that he discovered this miracle that is inside in the Quran, that was
Hmm.
hidden for 1400
Hmm.
years,
Yeah.
something that is in the Quran,
Yeah.
that tells you that tells us that tells to everyone that
Yeah.
this person has been chosen by God,
That's
and that he's most likely a messenger of God.
SubhanAllah, yeah. But you know what it took for this person to come out and do this? Like this person told me, I think 5 years ago that he doesn't believe, right? And then I still had him on my friends, you know, to just give him time. Maybe he'll accept, you know. So he was there on my friends list. From time to time, I post things about the religion. I post things from the messenger. He never commented or anything. The only time he decided to comment was when I posted my sermon about circumcision, and he was compelled to write, "Yeah, I disagree with you."
Yeah.
And that's how the conversation started, you know. So it's people's obsession with circumcision. It's unbelievable.
Who is that guy, Suleiman? Maybe
Well, if you go to my wall, you'll see. Yeah,
what's his name?
we're on YouTube, so don't know. I'll text it to you, Godwin. I'll just text it to you, Godwin. Yeah,
Just wondering.
Assalamu alaikum.
yeah,
I
yeah.
have a
All right,
comment.
so yes,
Alaikum salam.
Hello?
yeah, yeah. Go ahead, please.
Assalamu alaikum.
So,
Yeah, about the every time a messenger, it's interesting how Rashad has put every time, verse 34. Auzubillahi minash shaitanir rajim. Every time we sent a warner to a community, the leaders of that community said, "We reject the message you are sent with." They also said, "We are more powerful with more money and children, and we will not be punished." So the thing is that why every time is the same response of people is few things. Obviously, one, mashallah, you explained, Salman, that the jealousy, people don't accept it. Oh, who is this guy now? Few things. There are other factors. For example, people been living in have been idolizing previous messengers or something, right? Not the message. They corrupt the message, but idolize the messengers. um, so much that in their mind they are like some very unusual phenomena. They're like superhumans, and now suddenly this person who looks like a normal human being, you know. Same thing with Prophet Muhammad. Same thing with Rashad. Even though they will show all the back proofs that the message is from God, the tangible proofs people will see, but they will be either jealous or minimized. Like, who is this guy? How come you know he's not floating in the air or doesn't have a halo? The other thing is the worship God alone is the problem for them, because previously, obviously, when a religion gets so corrupted that there is nothing about worshiping God alone anymore, a new messenger comes to bring the same message, and then they're shocked. Oh, this message is very different than what we have been practicing. So Satan has made them believe to idolize other entities beside God. So the problem is the same all over again. So when Rashad comes, people, even they have read the Quran, they don't get the message. It's the message they reject. And then because message just prevents them to idolize something other than God. And so that's too much for them. The human being is so conditioned, and probably starts from the great few, whatever their minds were made up, but they didn't show it at that time, right? That there can be another God beside God. So idolatry prevents them uh, from accepting the message, and the other factors, of course. Yeah, that's it for now.
But, yes, but that is rebelling against God. So it's like you said, it's repeating what we did in uh, in God's kingdom. It's it's the same. It's yeah. These people who rejected God's message of the covenant. Yeah. They simply repeat that. That's what we initially did in the first life, arguing. Masha Allah.
So,
Yeah, mashallah. It's, for example, the proofs. No matter how many proofs are presented to them, like, oh, God would always back up a messenger with some kind of tangible proof, right? For example, Prophet Muhammad's proof was that the Quran itself, because he had no knowledge. He was a Gentile messenger. He had never read Torah or, the other Old Testament, but he had the knowledge of the perfect history of the past through the Quran. So when he was reciting those revelations, people said tales from the past that he's repeating or somebody's dictating him. But that was his proof. People knew he had no knowledge, right? So it's the message they reject, no matter what kind of proof it comes. And those who will accept the message, for example, I give my own example. Like, I really haven't had the knowledge of the Quran, and I am not such a great mathematics person. When the message came, and when actually I opened the book, and it's the message which made me believe that yes, Rashad Khalifa would be
mhm,
the messenger, because nobody can, that, like, how you see a person is not glorifying himself or needing anything. It's all
mhm,
about God alone and everything. So the message makes you the believer. And then for to strengthen your heart, like I looked at the mathematical code way after. It wasn't important for me anymore. I believed the message first, and the proof became secondary, you know. But the God has put this built-in
Yeah.
proof in the Quran, so those who have those who are really knowledgeable, they will open up their heart and see that this could not be from anybody but God. But then people do not even want to examine the proof itself, who have no knowledge of Quran. Let's see, they are not from traditional Muslims families, or don't think like traditional Muslims families. People who are born into those traditional Muslim homes just believe in on simple faith. Okay, this is the book of God, even though they haven't read it. That's why they follow lots of false doctrines such as Hadith and Sunnah. But if a knowledgeable person who is good at math and everything, and you really want them to please observe, take a look at this math miracle, um, they don't want to even pay attention to it. They was like, So really, it all comes to if the message penetrates your heart and soul, then you would like to examine the miracle that it
Mhm.
too. It's like goes hand in hand, and but the acceptance of the message is the key here.
Mhm.
That if you do that, then you will be also God strengthen your heart uh, with the miracle to like, oh yes, my belief is solid on solid grounds. It's not just a blind faith.
Mhm.
That's it.
Right. I mean, one thing I would say to that is like, when you I think somebody's not on mute, so if you can mute yourselves because this is background noise. Maybe I'll just mute them. Okay. Okay. What I was gonna say is like, so now that the message is out there, well, first of all, like when uh, Yusuf, can you mute, please? Okay. Let me mute.
It's Yusuf's mic. Yeah.
Yeah, I just muted him again. Okay, so when when I first read about the message, well, first I just read about the mathematical miracle, right? And it was just amazing. And then I read about the message um, from the Quran, Hadith, and Islam, and it really resonated with me that yeah, that makes perfect sense. What he's saying is logical and this and that. Then when I read about him being a messenger, that was very difficult for me. And in fact, like when we listen to the messenger of the covenant, he says about himself that he it took him a long time to accept also that he was a messenger. And so that is very difficult. But so that becomes a test for people, a lot of people. But when you
Hello,
see
Mona.
like now,
Hallo Yusuf.
ايش تهبل؟
Wacht, oké, sorry, يلا.
okay, so when you see now that when you see now that sorry, I lost my trail of thought. So when you see now that we have the message, and there's many messengers that are coming out, and they're all saying worship God alone on the surface, at least. So what distinguishes them from a true messenger as exposes them as falsifiers is that they don't have the proof. Because God says in the Quran that a messenger that comes, gives you the message, God sends a miracle, a proof with them, to prove that this person has been given the authority from God to preach it, and so for a believer to have a sincere 100% conviction, this proof reassures them to, believe their messenger without a doubt, and follow them, so it becomes very important for people when they want when they want 100% conviction on, because I mean, like I said, a person can come and tell you the message, like there's many people who, for example, saw the message from Rashad, right? Like Adib Yüksel, for example, right? But he doesn't have the proof on his own. Like he doesn't have any proof. Otherwise, he would claim to be a messenger. But there's others who did, and they claim to be messengers, but they didn't have the proofs to back it up. They didn't have any sort of a authority to show that they were sent by God. So that becomes a very crucial thing for us at this point, when we are presented with the proof and we have a perpetual miracle. That's why the responsibility becomes so great. Like I read verse 45, those before them disbelieved, and even though they did not see 1/10 of the miracle we have given to this generation, when they disbelieved my messenger, how terrible was my retribution. So simply because we have the mathematical miracle, it's not, shouldn't say simply, but because we have the mathematical miracle, I mean, and that's perpetual, that's what increases our responsibility so much more than all of these other people, because the miracle that is given to this generation is perpetual, like it says in time and place, so we have a huge responsibility.
Yeah, mashallah.
Masha Allah, Salman. Actually, it's amazing that everybody have such a different experience as how they got to the message. For me, it was when I found the Quran online and I read it. I was like, "Oh my God, this is like black and white." It was so easy to understand. It was finally, it's like something you want to read for hours.
Hmm.
There was like no ambiguity. And I remember when I got to Hadith and Sunnah, Satanic Invasion. I remember to myself that this is what I was looking for, because I never, although back in the days, in the very short time I was called a traditional Muslim, I wasn't exposed to a lot of Hadith. However, they were in part of the footnotes in the Quran, right? So only that I was exposed to, but it never held well in my stomach that this thing sounds right. And I remember when I read about what Hadith and Sunnah really is, and I was like, yeah, this is it. And so for everybody, so for some people it would have to be the miracle. For some people it would be just accepting the message, like finally they got the message. For me, it was like such a black and white. And I remember about a year ago, someone posted the same verse and about at least six of the same verse from different Quran. And of the about six verses, one was Rashad and one was Edith. So you read it, right? And the most clearest, most understandable verse, all the verses the same, was Rashad's translation. And so then I understood that that's what got me to look into it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first thing I noticed too when I read the transition, and I was like, it's too good to be true. And subhanallah, but thank God, at the end it was the mathematical miracle that really brought a surety to my heart. But yeah, I mean, everybody has different experiences. You're right, mashallah. Eventually, God sees this people's hearts, and based on His knowledge about what they deserve, and He brings them, or leads them on.
And mashallah, the criteria. Sorry. The
No,
criteria.
go ahead. No,
Oh,
Durant.
somebody wanted to say something?
I just want to say, when I was searching, when I discovered the message of Rashad Khalifa the first time, it was It was also in the book Quran Hadith in Islam, where I that was
Mm-hmm.
the proofs that the messenger was showing in that book. It was so uh, that was really a shock.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he explained everything so easy. It was so efficient. He destroyed. He really destroyed the hadiths in that book. You know, it was. I
Mm-hmm.
was really.
Really
Uh,
powerful.
uh, yeah, really powerful. It has really marked me. You know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that time, every time when I read this book,
Yeah.
Quran Hadith, it contains very, very powerful proofs that the messenger delivered, and that is also where the Muslims rejected the miracle
Mm-hmm.
from that moment. You know,
Right.
it's when the messenger published that book that uh,
Mm-hmm.
I think the Muslims turned their backs, you know,
Mm-hmm.
to the miracle and rejected everything. Yeah, that's all I want to say.
Inshallah.
MashaAllah.
Go ahead, Nudud.
Yeah, you know how God always tells, say, like verse 46, say, I say, ask you to do one thing, devote yourselves to God in pairs or as individuals, then reflect. Your friend Rashad is not crazy, he's a manifest warner to you just before the advent of a terrible retribution. I mean, they never, like God's criteria for a messenger is very, throughout the history we see, they, even though they get persecuted, they get made fun of, and they never ask people to idolize them or have anything to give them this and that. um, it's always the same, and you see, we have witnessed it, um, that, through Rashad's, I mean, I wasn't there, but, his audio videos, like, he's doing the same thing. So it's the pattern of God's messengers is always the same. They only ask you to worship God alone. They never want any praises from people, or yes, God commands you to follow them. Um, of course, the message is coming from God. So if we follow the messenger, basically we're following God. Uh, but then people think God is telling them to follow the messenger, and whatever the people attributed to them, uh, you know, like hadith and sunnah. So it's just, um, yeah, if the message is always the same, very simple, criteria of messenger is always the same, miracle is or something tangible proof is with them, and they don't ask for any wage or ask for any praise, and it's all about worshiping God alone.
Mm-hmm.
And but people have problem with that. That's the thing.
So,
Generation after generation, it's the
mm-hmm.
idol worship which deviates them from the right path. Sorry,
Yeah,
it wasn't.
mashallah.
Yeah, that's it.
Mashallah. Sorry, what?
That was it.
Oh, okay, mashallah. No, it's good. I was gonna say, regarding the book Quran Hadith in Islam, I mean, this one community that I had this experience with, like they're the first ones to disregard the message in the book Quran Hadith in Islam, like everything that you read in that book is so powerful. First of all, it's an amazing book for those who might not have read it. It is so concise. I mean, I don't read a lot of books because they're so big. This book was, subhanallah, I mean, such a readable book. It's so concise and so powerful. I mean, it's like it's not like he goes on and on about something. I mean, he's just always to the point and right hits the nail on the head in part of it, and it's so like well organized, mashallah. It's very effective, I think, and it really sums up the whole message. Like people who I think that people who have not read this book, even as submitters who believe in the message, like I think that it's highly recommend every one of us who have not read this book, Quran, Hadith, and Islam, to read it because it really sums up the message about Quran alone and why it's not the same as Christian Islam. For of course, many people might have the basic concepts like okay, we don't believe in Hadith and Sunnah and we believe in the Quran and but the way he has explained the traps, for example, like how he has explained um, the majority. I mean, he has highlighted like these verses from the Quran that we all know, but he has highlighted them, explained them, and connected them in such a way that it really like for me when the circumcision issue came up, the book was just so powerful. It just right to the point, like elaborates on each and every point. And what I see is that, uh, I mean, what I see is that it's so clear, but it's so difficult for these people to accept, and they're making the same arguments against the message that the traditional Muslims are making. And Dr. Khalifa is like mentioning them, explaining those arguments in the book that this is what they say, this is what they say, and this is what God says. But it's amazing, and that's why they don't read that book. Like they know so much about so many other parts of the miracle and this video and that video, but anywhere in anywhere in this book, like they have no idea about anything in the book, and those verses that are being mentioned, those are the verses that are always like put put aside, and emphasis are on different verses, and which is like we know it's the abuse of the scripture, selective emphasis and concealment. So certain groups will overemphasize on certain verses and just ignore certain verses of the Quran, but when you read that book, Quran, Hadith, and Islam, I mean, it shows the crux of the Quran and the crux of the message. It just brings out the core in front of you. So and I think, mashallah, for many people, I mean, this is what stands out when they see it. So you have to hold on to it. Of course, yes, there's other things that are there in the Quran, and we have to understand them. But really, if you don't have the basic foundation, I mean, it's in the Quran. Obviously, it's not. Nobody would even have to read the book, But you have to have the basic foundation. I mean, it just brings out that basic foundation for every submitter. What makes you a submitter and what distinguishes you from a traditional Muslim are all of those things specifically that are just very well, very efficiently put together in that book. That's all I wanted to say. Sorry for going on and on.
Masha Allah.
Coming back to what Sister Nidra comment about, so this is more of a question. Do you think because of how the other translation are translated and whether it's done purposely or not, it's what's leading people to believe that when they say, follow the prophet or follow your prophet, and that's how people bought into the whole idea of hadith and sunnah. Is it, would you say that it's based a lot on the way that the other Qurans are translated? I personally only had read Yusuf Ali, I think, before.
Well, I mean, the first thing is that the people who follow Hadith and Sunnah, majority of them have no clue what's in the Quran, so they don't even care to know what God says in the Quran. But yeah, there are certain verses that, like I said, there's the abuse of the scripture that they overemphasize on verses. Like, for example, the one that says, that God and his angels support the prophet, and God tells the believers who are at the time of Muhammad to support the prophet. So they use that to tell people that they should idolize him, right? But those people have no clue what's in the Quran, but they take out those verses and present them with translation or without translation. Like there's people who read those verses in Arabic and there's no translation, and they speak Arabic, and they look at those verses and they tell them, based on these verses you have to commemorate Muhammad, and they're tricked into commemorating Muhammad their whole lives. So the language really doesn't matter at that point, um, because they will do it anyways, even without a translation. Those people who speak Arabic, they don't have access to the Quran.
Masha Allah, thank you, Simon.
You know?
I actually spoken to many people whose language is Arabic, native language.
Hmm.
And I was just I normally have simple conversation with them, like, I don't think wearing hijab is a part of a dress code. And these people speak Arabic, and they said no, they believe that wearing hijab, and these are sometimes people who wear abaya too, the big clothing. They believe that although they speak Arabic, so it's like although they speak Arabic, is it like they're not, and Arabic is their mother tongue, is it not that they're not understanding the verses, or is a block to them? Because when someone's actually reading the language the Quran came in, there was no translation. They did not need a translator. They're seeing the word as God sent it, and they're saying that no, in the Quran you have to wear hijab. I mean, according to the Quran, you have to wear hijab. So, I mean, would you say that these people are just blocked from seeing it, although it's the same language?
Well, I mean, the thing is that what I'm saying is that the language is really irrelevant. I mean, like people who read the Quran in Arabic, the Arabic that they read is not the same as the conversational Arabic. So, but the thing is that when they read these verses, they have used maybe Huda or Yusuf or anybody else who's Arabic is their mother tongue, can probably elaborate on that. But for example, like when it talks about the verses where they take it out to be hijab, right? I mean, God says there are multiple meaning or allegorical verses, right? So there's multiple meanings to a certain thing. So they can take that to mean hijab, or they can take that like the physical covering, or they can take that to mean what it's really saying, just to cover, you know? So it really depends on for example, even in any language, certain words will have different meanings. So, but it's really up to you how you take that. So really what it comes down to is really guidance. Its language becomes irrelevant. But yes, it doesn't help, obviously, when they translate it as hijab. So they show it to you go to a scholar, and then he prints out these verses to you and says, based on this verse, you have to wear hijab, and he'll twist and manipulate the meanings of the verses even without a translation, and tell you that these verses are telling you to do that. Um, so, but the translation obviously does play a role for people who don't speak the language. But even for people who speak the language and they read those verses, I mean, they can easily be taken out of context. It really just comes down to guidance at that point.
Mashallah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I was discussing with somebody the other day, and it all goes back to, you know, somebody was confused about the free will and predestined um, thing. How could those two work together? But once again, um, people who have made up their mind, like, were not gonna believe God knew that. And so no matter whether it's this language or that language, uh, they're they choose not to believe. And even if they see the message or the Quran, or their Arabic is their first language, they're not gonna be able to see the message in it. And they will be blinded, prevented by their own you know, um, whatever the ego or the initial decision from the great feud, um, that because God knew few souls, if they are given another chance, and it was like really minority of the minority, if they are going to be given another chance, they will believe without seeing God. They will believe in the hereafter, and they will absolutely have no doubt. But God gave everybody the same chance, equally. And when once again they reject the message because they were not to believe what they didn't believe before. So this is what I said. So Solomon, correct me if I'm wrong. So it all goes back to our initial
Yeah,
decision.
mashallah. You're
Yeah.
right.
So they were having hard time understanding that. But that's what it is. It is for those few souls with God, when angel said that throw them in hell, God said, I know what you do not know. You know, there were still there gonna be things, there gonna be, certain environment, and they're given, why, and that's why every soul, God gives them a perfect test area that their true convictions could come out, like where a soul, on which household it will go to, who will be the parents, how would be the childhood. But for God has created even the test, so um, be to be, like just, so nobody can say that we were not given the same chances. That's why God knows where a soul should be born, who should be a king be born in a
Mm-hmm.
palace, who should
Mm-hmm.
be born in a beggar's home.
Mm-hmm.
And the soul, so the test would be designed exactly so they can actually benefit the most from the test, and their soul can reflect and go be appreciative. So
Mm-hmm.
there is a surah where God says, I think it's Surah 76, we gave you the eyesight and the hearing and showed you the two paths. Like if we were studying it the other day, last night actually. I'm just going to read those two verses if you don't mind, quickly. So 76. No, no. Yeah. Auzubillah minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. It starts from verse 1. Is it not a fact that there was a time when the human being was nothing to be mentioned? Like we didn't even exist. And here we are with so much ego. We created the human from a liquid mixture from two parents in order to test him. So the whole purpose of our life is that one test. Thus we made him a hearer and a seer. Then we showed him the two paths. Then he's either appreciative or unappreciative. If we think about it, the hearing and the eyesight. The other day, Solomon, you were describing, and the brain, like how we, like take it for granted and don't, appreciate like what kind of faculties are these. The hearing and the eyesight is the two receptor or two senses which gather the information by either seeing or hearing. Either we read or we hear something, and we make up our mind that, so the human being would be either appreciative of everything and find God, or unappreciative. And God says we created them for a test. you know Simple as that. So yeah, if the chance is the same for everyone. I don't know, I went a little too vague. All right,
Mm-hmm.
thanks.
Mashallah. Yeah, I just want to say that also, the initial decision that somebody makes, they also make that decision based on who they are, and what they are from the inside. People who are righteous, the souls that deserve redemption would even make those decisions based on that, and then those people will consistently make the right decisions, subsequently,
Masha Allah.
inshallah.
Like, for example, coming back to my question, I understand that, okay, they took that word hijab and it may have multiple meanings and they took one out of it. But how about, how about which hadith other than my hadith do you believe in? There's no two meaning. There's no two meaning to that. So I
No,
don't understand how.
there is, like, I mean, they could use it in a different context, like it says hadith in Arabic, but the word hadith is just not always taken literally, so they'll take it like, okay, which word, or what saying, you know, so they'll just use it that way, you know, so they'll look at it that way, because like I said, it can be used in a different context. I think maybe Huda,
Okay.
you could comment on that, the word hadith in Arabic, or maybe Yusuf could. But yeah, I mean,
I would like, but I don't read Arabic. I'm sorry.
oh, okay. Okay, so that leaves us with Huda. So Huda has to make a comment. Okay, nope, not happening. Okay, yeah. So if you just maybe look it up, what it means in Arabic.
Because when you look up the word hadith, doesn't it mean saying?
Yeah,
So then
it,
I'm
it
thinking,
means many things, like news or story, you know, or report or account or narrative, right? So that's the basic meaning of the word Arab in Arabic.
so they just pulled one of their meanings.
Yeah, they just get the meaning that suits them, basically, right? Just like the
Yeah.
translation itself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Alhamdulillah for messengers.
thank God.
Yeah, mashallah, God's mercy. God says it's His mercy that He sends messengers. And then, and there's a verse about Prophet Muhammad. God said, "We send you as a mercy to the world." Um, and now they say He is mercy, like Him as a person. Forget about the message. They don't like the other day. It was so much nonsense I had to hear. That no, because he was so special that God made him mercy, that whatever the role you will be playing, you will be a perfect model. Of course, why a messenger would not be the perfect model of the message he's giving, right? Who else would be? If they don't do what they preach, then first of all, they're hypocrites. Why a messenger could ever be a hypocrite? They have no other choice but to be the utmost submitters, right?
Hmm.
God commands them. God say, I command you. Say, my Lord commanded me to be the utmost submitter.
Yeah,
Then,
yeah. I'd sorry. Go ahead.
yeah. So, but they were saying no. This person, like other than God, somebody else created him and guided him. That he was so perfect that God chose him. Like they don't see that God is running everything. God is the one who designed him, gave him his guidance, and then he was able to even deliver the message. Anyway, that's it.
SubhanAllah, yeah. I would say that all of these messengers, they were good examples, like they were great examples, good examples. Uh, and But I don't use the word perfect because they made mistakes as human beings, and God wanted them to make those mistakes so people don't idolize them, you know. But
Yeah, Masha.
mashallah, but subhanallah. But this is exactly what they did with Muhammad, you know. Like they said, well, he's perfect, and they made him infallible, and the Christians similarly, the Christians made Jesus infallible, but they were fallible human beings in the way when it came to their own lives, and they made mistakes in their own lives in application of the message. But they were good role models for all of us, you know. Like God says, same thing about Abraham. You know, in Abraham, there's a good example, but you don't see them, you know, praising Abraham the way they praise Muhammad, you know, because they clearly idolize him more than they idolize Abraham, but they idolize both of them.
Right. They don't leave any opportunity to idolize.
Yeah, 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 exactly.
It just God is.
Yeah, I
While
mean,
God says all praise be to God,
subhanallah.
they know their praises are so distributed
Yeah,
that maybe
but
God
this
gets the
is,
least share of that.
yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, this is God's design. Like this is in accordance with God's will. Like these people, you know, have everything, but they, you know, God has given us so many proofs, and they have a messenger. I mean, and how they reacted to this messenger, you know, despite the message being so clear and, you know, given to us in such a simple manner that they just disregard it. But this is God's design, and we just all we can do is, God says you cannot guide the blind out of their string, you know, or you can make hearers, nor you can make hearers out of those who are in the graves. And you cannot guide the people we love. I mean, God is the only one who guides, and so like, it doesn't matter what you do, you know, these people will not see unless God, wills for them to hear.
Satan is very conniving, and the way Christians idolize Jesus is Satan packaged it differently to the Muslim in a
Mm-hmm.
way whereby you don't have the cross, you don't have the picture of Jesus. That a lot of, especially a lot of the Indian Muslim, they see idolatry in different ways. They see it like a murti, a statue,
Mm-hmm.
picture on the wall. So when it came to Islam, Satan packaged it a little bit differently. You
Mm-hmm.
just keep talking about Muhammad. You just don't make a statue or a picture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, if somebody makes a picture, then they have a problem with that.
yeah, yeah. And I think, and after Muhammad, as far as Rashad, it's like, the appendices and the footnotes and everything is, he did it straight from Quran, and he put it within the covers of the Quran. So if people had an objection, they should have objected when he was alive. And now people use
Mm-hmm.
that, against a person who who really accepts it.
Mm-hmm.
And you see it time and time again, time and time again. You only follow God Arabic Quran. And those people who's telling you to follow God Arabic Quran are in a way repulsing you, because really, how many people have time to go learn Arabic and then read the Quran? So you see a lot of people, not even submission, even the Quranist community, they're saying you fully cannot know about Islam um, without learning Arabic or learning the Arabic language and reading the Quran in Arabic. So Satan. So my point is Satan packaging the lies in different formats as the time goes by.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
first you have to waste 30 years of your life to learn Arabic.
Yeah.
Then forget about worshiping God alone and everything. Anyway, yeah.
And then when you learn the Arabic, they will replace the Quran by Hadith and Sunnah. You know,
True.
they would say, "Yeah, forget this. Now you follow this." They show you the hadith.
That's
Yeah.
right. And also, um, any translation they do, like other traditional translations, let's say, it's available in English and Urdu, whatever. They come from the background of Hadith and Sunnah. So the translation is affected by all the Hadith and Sunnah, you know. So not backed by the message of the Quran. So then they misguide again, by those translations with providing tafsir based on Hadith and Sunnah and his history, which is based on Hadith and Sunnah. Yeah.
Alhamdulillah. It's why when you're reading the other version than Rashad, you really can't. You have a hard time reading it, and then you don't even want to read it. It's probably because of all the extra things that they've strived to explain in the version.
All right, everyone. Inshallah, I'll be. Um, if there are
Maybe.
no other comments, or I'll be going right now. Actually, I have to do something.
Okay.
Okay. Assalamu
Um.
alaikum.
I have to go pray. Me too.
Us too. Us too.
So. Okay. So thank you guys for joining us.
Yeah.
God willing, our
Thank
next study. You're welcome. So God
tomorrow.
willing, inshallah, our next study is going to be on Tuesday. God willing, at 2 p.m. Pacific time. God willing, and our teacher is going to be
I think
who's
it's me.
I
Inshallah.
think it's you. Okay, inshallah. Our teacher
Hmm.
is going to be Nadir. God
Inshallah.
willing. God
Okay.
bless you guys. I was gonna say Huda. Just
Oh,
kidding.
is it?
No, no,
If it could be Huda, I don't know. I'm not sure if it's
no.
me.
She. I was just joking because she doesn't want to do it.
She did a wonderful job last time.
She
Yeah,
did. What she
I
did, she did a
agree.
very good job.
Yeah,
I did. See,
mashallah.
Huda, you're hearing that?
Yeah, Huda.
Everybody
Don't do
thinks she did a
not.
great job.
You did such a good study, mashallah.
So,
So if it is Huda's turn, let her be,
okay,
please.
well, let's give it to Huda then. If
Woohoo!
all right, Huda, you're next. We all volunteered you.
I'll do on Saturday, inshallah. Okay.
Inshallah. Okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Bye. Assalamu alaikum.
Bye.
Assalamu alaikum.